My GF said, "We're just dating, no honesty needed," after I saw her DMs with her ex. I dumped her, now she's a single mom begging me back. Hello everyone, before we get into the video, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the like button if you want more content like this. Thank you. I'm Marcus, 26, a graphic designer from Portland, and I've always been the guy who shows up when he says he will and remembers the little things that matter to people. I met Lily at a rooftop bar during one of those summer block parties where everyone's a friend of a friend. She was this charismatic real estate agent with an infectious laugh that could fill a room, and we ended up talking for hours about the weirdest documentaries we'd binged and which reality TV shows were so bad they became genius. What hooked me wasn't just that she was beautiful, but how she told these captivating stories about bizarre client requests and house showings that went completely sideways, like the couple who wanted to see if a house had good feng shui for their pet snake, or the woman who insisted on sage cleansing every room before viewing. Lily had this way of making even mundane real estate drama sound like an adventure, and I was genuinely intrigued by someone who seemed to find humor and stories everywhere. Over the next 8 months, our relationship intensified fast, and by month 3, Lily was practically living at my downtown loft. I loved having her there. She brought this energy that made my carefully organized space feel more alive, even if she did leave her heels scattered around and never quite figured out how to load the dishwasher properly. I went above and beyond because that's just who I am when I care about someone. I designed all her marketing materials for her real estate listings for free, creating these sleek property brochures that actually helped her close deals faster. When her car spent 2 weeks in the shop, I drove her to showings across town without complaint, sometimes waiting in parking lots for an hour while she walked clients through million-dollar houses. When she mentioned her expensive apartment was draining her finances, I even helped her move out to save money, spending my entire Saturday loading boxes and furniture. But looking back, there were red flags I kept rationalizing away. Despite constantly claiming money troubles, Lily was secretive about her actual finances. She'd get vague when I asked about her commission checks or why she could afford designer coffee but not groceries. She'd receive these late-night calls that she'd take in my bedroom with the door closed, always returning with some story about difficult clients or family drama. When I'd ask about her past relationships, she'd deflect with jokes or change the subject entirely. The biggest red flag was someone in her contacts listed as R, who texted her constantly. "Just a friend from college," she'd say quickly whenever I noticed, but college friends don't usually text at midnight on weeknights. I told myself I was being paranoid, that trust meant not questioning every little thing, but part of me was starting to feel like I was dating someone who kept most of her life carefully compartmentalized away from me. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday night during one of our Netflix binges when Lily fell asleep on my couch halfway through some true crime documentary she'd picked. I was about to wake her up to move to bed when her phone started buzzing incessantly with Snapchat notifications. The screen kept lighting up on my coffee table and I couldn't help but see the preview messages appearing from Ryan Redhart. "Thanks for covering the hotel bill, can't wait for next weekend, and you're amazing, baby." My stomach dropped as I stared at those words, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. I'd never heard her mention any Ryan, and she definitely wasn't covering hotel bills with money she claimed not to have. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, watching her sleep peacefully while my world started crumbling. Before I made the decision that would change everything, I picked up her phone. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Months of messages with Ryan, who was clearly her ex based on their conversation history, talking about weekend getaways I'd never heard about and intimate moments that overlapped with our relationship timeline. But the most gut-wrenching part was seeing how she was funding these meetups, screenshots of Venmo payments I'd sent her for rent help and car repairs being immediately transferred to cover their hotel rooms and fancy dinners. She wasn't just cheating, she was using my money to do it. Then I found the messages with Jake from her gym, another ongoing relationship where she complained about me being too clingy and always wanting to know where I am. The worst part was reading her brag to Jake about how easy it was to manipulate my generosity. "He's so eager to help, I just mention money stress and he practically throws his wallet at me." She'd screenshotted my thoughtful messages to mock them with both guys, turning my genuine care into entertainment. I sat there reading months of lies and manipulation until my hands were shaking, realizing that while I'd been falling in love with someone I thought was real, she'd been treating me like her personal ATM and emotional backup plan. The next morning, I waited until Lily woke up naturally, then calmly placed her phone on the coffee table between us. "We need to talk," I said, and something in my tone must have told her exactly what this was about because her face went from sleepy confusion to defensive annoyance in about 2 seconds. "You went through my phone?" she said, not even attempting to deny what I'd found. Ryan sends his thanks for the hotel bill, I replied quietly. Instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, she actually rolled her eyes. Look, Marcus, we're just dating. I never promised you exclusivity. The casual way she said it, like months of what I thought was a committed relationship meant nothing, hit me harder than the cheating itself. What about the money? I asked. All those times you needed help with rent, car repairs, moving expenses that you used to fund your other relationships? She shrugged like I was being ridiculous. We're just dating, no honesty needed. You chose to spend that money, I didn't force you. The coldness in her voice was something I'd never heard before, like she was talking to a stranger instead of someone who'd spent months caring about her. You were naive if you thought we were in a serious relationship just because we spent time together, she continued, checking her nails like this conversation was boring her. I mean, did we ever actually have the talk about being exclusive? Because I don't remember signing any contracts. I stared at her, realizing that the woman I'd fallen for had never actually existed. This person sitting across from me, dismissive and cruel, was who she really was underneath all the charm. Without saying another word, I started gathering her things from around my apartment. The clothes draped over my chair, the expensive skincare products cluttering my bathroom counter, the books she'd never finished reading. What are you doing? She asked, finally showing some concern. I'm helping you pack, I said calmly. Since we're just dating and no honesty is needed, you won't need to keep your stuff here anymore. She actually had the nerve to call me dramatic as I handed her the bag of her belongings, like I was overreacting to discovering months of betrayal and financial manipulation. After Lily left, I did something that surprised even me. I didn't contact her at all. No angry texts, no demands for explanations, no attempts to get closure. I just went completely silent and focused on rebuilding my life from the ground up. The first thing I did was start therapy, something I'd always thought was for people with bigger problems than mine, but I needed help understanding how I'd let myself become someone's financial safety net without even realizing it. My therapist helped me see that I'd been love-bombing Lily, showering her with generosity and attention while ignoring all the signs that she wasn't reciprocating any of it. I joined a hiking group that met every Saturday morning, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was constantly available for Lily's needs. Being out in nature with people who were genuinely excited to be there felt like remembering who I was before I started defining myself by how useful I could be to someone else. I started taking on passion projects I'd neglected, designing concert posters for local bands, volunteering my skills for nonprofit organizations, creating art just because it made me happy rather than because it solved someone else's problems. My sister Nina visited from Seattle about a month after the breakup, and she had this way of cutting through my self-doubt with brutal honesty that I desperately needed. Marcus, she never once asked how your day was, she pointed out over coffee. In all the months you were together, she never contributed financially to anything, never planned a date, never even brought you soup when you had that flu. You were doing all the emotional labor while she was literally using your money to cheat on you. Nina helped me see the toxic patterns I'd ignored, how Lily would get quiet and withdrawn whenever I tried to set any boundaries, how she'd make me feel guilty for wanting basic honesty in our relationship, how she'd turn my kindness into obligation by making me feel selfish if I didn't immediately help with every crisis. I realized I'd been dating someone who saw me as a convenience rather than a partner, someone who liked what I could do for her but had no interest in actually knowing who I was as a person. The hardest part was accepting that I'd been complicit in my own manipulation by being so eager to prove my worth through what I could provide rather than demanding to be valued for who I actually was. I blocked Lily on all social media platforms, deleted her contact information, and asked our mutual friends not to give me updates about her life. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where she was or who she was with or whether she needed help with something. I was just focused on rebuilding my own sense of self-worth. After 3 months of therapy, hiking, and rediscovering hobbies I'd abandoned, I started dating again, but with completely different standards. I learned to recognize love bombing in others and catch myself when I fell into people-pleasing patterns. When someone showed interest in me, I paid attention to whether they asked questions about my life, whether they offered to pay for their own coffee, whether they seemed genuinely curious about my thoughts and feelings rather than just my willingness to solve their problems. I realized that healthy relationships required mutual investment from day one, not one person giving everything while hoping the other person would eventually start caring back. 6 months later, I was genuinely thriving in ways I hadn't expected when our mutual friend Beth called me with news that felt like karma had finally caught up with Lily. "You're not going to believe what happened," Beth said, and I could hear the mix of shock and vindication in her voice. Lily's entire life has completely imploded. Apparently, Ryan had discovered her relationship with Jake through some mutual connections and dumped her immediately, but not before telling Jake about Ryan, which ended that relationship too. Her real estate license had been suspended for ethics violations, something about misrepresenting property conditions and pocketing client deposits, which explained why she'd always been so secretive about her work. The cherry on top was that she was pregnant from a one-night stand with a married client who wanted absolutely nothing to do with her and had threatened legal action if she tried to contact his family. She'd been forced to move back with her parents in some small town outside Portland and was working at a local diner, serving coffee and pie to the same kind of people she used to mock for their simple lives. Beth painted a picture of someone whose carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled, leaving her with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. What fascinated me wasn't the schadenfreude. I genuinely felt sorry for anyone going through that much chaos at once, but how predictable it all was. Someone who treats relationships like transactions and people like resources eventually runs out of both. About a week after Beth's call, I started noticing subtle changes on social media that I recognized as Lily testing the waters. Since I'd blocked her on everything, she couldn't contact me directly, but mutual friends started sharing her posts about missing real love and realizing what matters when it's gone. Classic manipulation tactics disguised as personal growth insights. Then came the lengthy emails to my work account, which she must have found on my design portfolio website. The first one was a masterclass in fake vulnerability. Marcus, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that losing you made me realize I'd been living my life completely wrong. I was scared of real intimacy, so I sabotaged the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm in therapy now, working on myself, learning to be the person you deserved me to be all along. The emails kept coming every few days, each one more desperate than the last. She claimed she'd found God, that pregnancy had given her new perspective on what mattered, that she'd realized I was the one, and she'd been too immature to see it. She painted elaborate pictures of the life we could build together, how she'd changed, how she'd spend the rest of her life making up for the pain she'd caused. What struck me was how she still didn't actually apologize for the specific things she'd done, the cheating, the lying, the financial manipulation. Instead, she apologized for not being ready for real love and not appreciating what we had, keeping everything vague enough that she never had to take responsibility for her actual choices. When I didn't respond to any of the emails, she escalated to having friends reach out on her behalf. Ashley, one of her real estate colleagues, called me claiming Lily was really struggling and just needs closure. Another friend texted asking if I'd be willing to meet Lily for coffee, just to help her move on. I politely declined every request, explaining that I'd moved on and wished her well, but had no interest in reopening that chapter of my life. That's when things got really desperate. Lily started showing up at my gym, timing her visits to coincide with mine. She'd position herself where I couldn't help but see her, always looking intentionally vulnerable, no makeup, workout clothes that showed her pregnant belly, this whole "look how far I've fallen" aesthetic. When I ignored her completely and switched to working out at different times, she began approaching other gym members asking about me, creating enough of a scene that the staff had to ask her to leave. The final straw was when she contacted my workplace claiming there was a family emergency and she needed to reach me urgently. My boss actually pulled me out of a client meeting, genuinely concerned something had happened to my parents or sister. When I called the number she'd left and heard Lily's voice instead of emergency news, I realized she'd crossed a line that even her previous behavior hadn't prepared me for. "Marcus, please don't hang up," she said immediately. "I know this seems crazy, but I didn't know how else to reach you. I'm desperate. My life is falling apart and you're the only person who ever really cared about me." I listened to her sob for maybe 30 seconds before calmly saying, "Lily, contacting my workplace with false emergencies is harassment. Don't contact me, my friends, my family, or my job again. I'm blocking this number." But even as I said it, I knew she wasn't done. Someone who'd spent months manipulating my kindness wasn't going to give up just because I'd set a boundary. She'd keep escalating until she either got what she wanted or found some other source of validation and support. The only question was how far she'd go before accepting that I was never going back to being her safety net. The next morning, I did what I do best when faced with a complex problem. I made a systematic plan and executed it with the same methodical precision I brought to engineering projects, except this time I was deconstructing a future instead of building one. First call was to Linda at the Estes Park venue, and explaining the situation to her was somehow worse than the actual breakup because she'd gotten genuinely excited about our wedding over the past 3 months. "Oh honey, I'm so sorry," she said when I told her I needed to cancel everything. "But you know the contract specifies that cancellations within 6 months of the event forfeit the full deposit. $4,000 down the drain, but she agreed to release me from the remaining balance, which would have been another $8,500 on completion." The photographer was more understanding. Sarah Chin had been in the business long enough to know that engagements sometimes don't lead to weddings, and she refunded half my deposit since I was canceling with adequate notice. "I hope you find someone who deserves the kind of thoughtfulness you put into planning this," she told me, and I almost lost it right there on the phone because she understood something Jessica never had. The caterer kept my $2,000 deposit but released me from the contract, the florist kept $800, and the band was actually cool about it. They kept $500 but said they'd give me priority booking if I ever needed them again, which felt optimistic in a way that almost made me laugh. All told, I lost about $7,500 in deposits, but I managed to recover $4,500 that would have been due on completion, and honestly, paying that money felt like the cheapest way to buy my freedom from a relationship that was already over. While I was making cancellation calls, I was also quietly arranging the next phase of my disappearance, because something about Jessica's casual cruelty had clarified exactly how I wanted to handle this situation, completely and permanently. My company had been trying to get someone to transfer to the Austin office for months, and when I called my supervisor Tuesday morning and expressed interest, he practically jumped through the phone with excitement. "Alex, this is perfect timing. We need someone with your infrastructure experience down there, and frankly, you've earned the opportunity after the Mesa Verde project success." The transfer came with a $8,000 raise and moving expenses covered, which felt like the universe apologizing for Jessica's betrayal by handing me a better job in a city where I could start completely fresh. I spent Wednesday and Thursday quietly packing my essential belongings, clothes, electronics, important documents, the engagement ring I'd never given her, and arranging for a moving company to collect my furniture the following week. Jessica was spending most of her time studying at Tyler's place anyway, which gave me the space I needed to extract myself from our shared life without drama or prolonged explanations. Friday morning, she texted me about coming by to get some of her things and maybe talk about how we can work through this, but I was already 3 hours south on I-25, my Honda Civic loaded with everything that mattered, driving toward a city where no one knew about my relationship failures or abandoned wedding plans. The note I left on our kitchen counter was shorter than any wedding vow I'd planned to write. "Found someone who actually wants a future with me. Good luck with Tyler." I'd blocked her number, unfriended her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn, because I knew Jessica well enough to know she'd try to maintain some kind of connection that would allow her to keep me as a backup option while she explored her new life with Tyler. My email got changed, my address was no longer available to her, and I'd instructed our mutual friends that I didn't want updates about Jessica's life or relationship status. The nuclear option, Tony from work called it when I explained my strategy, but some situations require total containment to prevent ongoing contamination. By the time Jessica realized I wasn't just taking a break to cool off, I was already setting up my new apartment in Austin, meeting my new colleagues, and discovering that Texas had hiking trails I'd never heard of and barbecue that made Denver's food scene look amateur. My phone buzzed constantly for the first week. Calls from Jessica, texts from her friends, voicemails that started angry and gradually became desperate, but I never listened to them, never read them, never responded to any of it. I'd learned something crucial about my own boundaries during those wedding cancellation calls. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is make it impossible for someone to hurt you again, and sometimes disappearing completely is the only way to preserve whatever dignity you have left after someone casually destroys 4 years of shared history because they found someone with a Tesla and bigger dreams. The answer came 3 months later at our mutual friend Beth's 30th birthday party, an event I'd been looking forward to because I wanted Beth to meet Claire, the woman I'd been dating for the past 2 months. Claire was everything Lily wasn't. A software engineer who insisted on splitting every check, someone who asked thoughtful questions about my design work and actually remembered my answers, someone who contributed to conversations instead of just waiting for her turn to talk about herself. We'd met through the hiking group, and what I loved most about her was how she made me feel valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. Beth had rented out the back room of this trendy restaurant, and I was having a genuinely great time introducing Claire to my friends when I spotted her across the room, Lily, visibly pregnant now, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Beth appeared beside me immediately, looking mortified. Marcus, I swear I didn't invite her. She just showed up saying she needed to talk to you and wouldn't leave. I could see Claire processing the situation, this composed, intelligent woman taking in the obvious drama that had just walked into what should have been a celebration. That's her, I said quietly, and Claire nodded with understanding rather than jealousy or insecurity. Do you want to leave? She asked, and I realized that this was exactly the kind of partner I'd been looking for, someone whose first instinct was supporting me rather than creating more drama. No, I said. If she wants to talk, we can get it over with. Lily approached us like she was walking to her own execution, and up close I could see how much she'd changed. The confident, manipulative woman who'd dismissed my feelings 8 months ago had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely desperate. Marcus, she said, barely acknowledging Claire's presence. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I really need to talk to you. Privately. Claire squeezed my hand and said she'd give us a few minutes, moving away with a grace that reminded me why I was falling for her. Please, Lily continued, tears already starting. I know I ruined everything, but I need you to know that this pregnancy, this whole mess, it made me realize what I lost. You were the only real thing in my life and I threw it away for nothing. I looked at her, this person who'd once made me feel so small and inadequate, and felt nothing but distant sympathy. You didn't lose me, Lily, I said calmly. You never valued me in the first place. You can't lose something you never wanted to keep. Her face crumpled, and she grabbed my arm with the kind of desperation I recognized from her emails. That's not true. I loved you, I just didn't know how to show it. I was scared of being vulnerable, scared of getting hurt, so I hurt you first. But I've changed, Marcus. Being pregnant, losing everything, it's made me realize that you were my person and I was just too stupid to see it. The practiced vulnerability, the carefully crafted explanation that made her the victim of her own fear, it was the same manipulation playbook, just delivered with more tears. I'm with someone now, I said, glancing over at Claire who was giving us space while staying close enough to intervene if needed. Someone who knows how to value a relationship from day one. Lily followed my gaze and I saw the flash of jealousy and calculation that reminded me exactly who she really was underneath all the remorse. She can't love you like I do, she said, voice getting sharper. She doesn't know you like I know you. We have history, we have a connection that can't just be replaced. That's when I delivered the line I'd been unconsciously preparing for months, using her own words against her with surgical precision. You said no honesty was needed when we were dating. Well, honestly, you're not my problem anymore. The words hit her like a physical blow, and I watched her face cycle through shock, anger, and finally a kind of defeated recognition. She taught me that lesson herself, that someone who doesn't value honesty in a relationship doesn't deserve the comfort of it when everything falls apart. Marcus, please, she whispered, but I was already walking back toward Claire and my actual life. I heard through Beth a few weeks later that Lily had left town permanently, moved to some other state where she could start over without the weight of everyone knowing her story. I genuinely hoped she found whatever she was looking for and learned to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. Claire and I got more serious over the following months, and what amazed me was how easy it felt when both people actually wanted to be there. She celebrated my successes, contributed to our shared expenses without being asked, planned thoughtful dates, and most importantly, never once made me feel like I had to earn her affection through what I could provide. We moved in together after 8 months, not because one of us needed financial help or a place to crash, but because we genuinely enjoyed building a life together. Looking back, I realized that Lily had actually done me a favor by showing me exactly what I didn't want in a partner. She taught me that self-respect means never accepting less than mutual respect and honesty, and that someone who truly loves you won't make you beg for basic decency. The best revenge really is living well, and I was finally living very well indeed.